Terraria is a land of adventure. A land of mystery. A land that's yours to shape, defend, and enjoy. Your options in Terraria are limitless. Are you an action gamer with an itchy trigger finger? A master builder? A collector? An explorer? There's something for everyone. What is an iceberg meme? The idea is the entire image represents all knowledge about a subject. From there, parts of the iceberg are organized into tiers to categorize the knowledge. A common categorization is to organize information from top to bottom in order from what most people know to fringe, unproven conspiracy theories. This makes sense for the iceberg metaphor. The tip of an iceberg is the part you can see from a ship. Most people also know that a big part of the iceberg is underwater, but only people with very specialized equipment can actually go into the ocean and see just how deep an iceberg is to get the whole picture. Let's begin. Wall of flesh is the guide's body. Pretty popular theory that the guide is the wall of flesh. Possibly confirmed by Red, but might have also been a joke. Blood Moon PSM. During a blood moon, all female NPCs except the party girl and the princess use more irritable or aggressive dialogue than normal. This is a reference to the fact that some women in real life become irritable or aggressive due to premenstrual syndrome. Both the menstrual cycle and the real-world moon cycle occur approximately every 28 days. Hoik, a glitch that allows the player to clip through walls. It was acknowledged by the devs and kept it in the game intentionally. Akram is Marco backwards. Apparently Marco is the name of the programmer who coded the console boss Akram. Mechanic was a slave. According to Terraria lore, the mechanic was captured and forced to create the mechanical bosses. Empress of Light Nose, EOL's nose kinda also looks like a mouth, that's it. Jungle Mimic. A jungle variant of the biome mimics. It's unspawnable in normal gameplay but otherwise fully functional. Secret world seeds that cause the world to generate differently. There are currently 4 such seeds, 05162020, not the bees, for the worthy and Terraria. Eye of Cthulhu spawns during daytime on box art. The physical releases of Terraria show the Eye of Cthulhu. Some versions the twins, during daytime, which is not possible in-game. Red Potion, previously unobtainable potion that inflicts many debuffs when consumed, now obtainable in the drunk world and for the worthy seeds, actually gives you buffs in the latter. Unfinished Mechanical Brain. The unfinished mechanical brain is referenced in the lore. The mechanic had time to create a copy of the Eater of Worlds, but not the brain of Cthulhu. Queen bee spawning on Worldgen. In older Terraria versions, random larvae in hives could be destroyed by lava immediately upon first loading a world, causing a queen bee to spawn. Dryad extinction. The official lore mentions that the Dryad is the last of her kind. In the credits she is shown turning into a tree, perhaps permanently? This would make her race effectively extinct. Zapinator does infinite damage. The 2 Zapinators are both pretty odd weapons. The projectiles they fire can get random effects, such as the ability to go through walls, slowing down dramatically and even getting their damage multiplied by 10 among other things. Terrarian can get legendary. Leos cannot get their speed modified. That's why they can't get the legendary prefix. The only exception is the Terrarian that can get the legendary prefix with unique bonuses. Human quack. Ducks have a rare chance to make a human quack sound rather than actual duck noises.
Quack.
Wind has always existed. Wind has existed pre-1.4 but it only affected some visual effects like the bubbles from the bubble machine. rain and background clouds among others. Some projectiles like Duke Fishron's bubbles or the North Pole's snowflakes were also affected. Companion Cube Tooltip lies. The tooltip states, will never threaten to stab you and, in fact, cannot speak, but the companion cube will, in fact, speak and even stab you if you are in complete darkness. Soul Scythe, weapon that used to exist in the game and has since then been removed, allegedly due to copyright concerns, reference to the anime Soul Eater. Rares, enemies, kills. The abbreviation from the accessory REK. 3000 stands for Angler is immortal, reference to the fact that the angler leaves instead of dies, most likely to avoid raising the game's age rating. Angel statue is useless. The angel statue used to not do anything in the older versions, it wasn't even able to be placed. It started a running joke about how useless it is, but perhaps that's just what they want you to think? Fighting multiple fishrons simultaneously, a now patched glitch allowed you to have infinite fishing lures and catch multiple things at once and even summon multiple fishrons. Rimrag, the Terraria YouTuber Rimmer made an ARG, alternate reality game, that led to one of his videos. The guide's origins are a mystery. The guide is a pretty mysterious figure, seemingly waiting for you in new worlds and knowing everything about them. The official lore mentions the Order of the Guide, whose mission is to preserve the legends of Terraria. The player character is based on Final Fantasy IV sprites. Very old player character sprites used to resemble those from Final Fantasy. Hard mode dungeon enemies are fallen heroes. Not sure about that one. The post-Plantera dungeon enemies use similar types of weapons to the ones available to the players, and you can find all sorts of enemies there. From mages to kung fu warriors to snipers. They seem to lack a coherent theme, except the fact they're all dead. Perhaps the dungeon is a sort of limbo for dead heroes? The Ancient Spirits of Light and Dark. The Ancient Spirits of Light and Dark refers to the chat message that appears upon entering hard mode, telling you that they've been released. It's often assumed to be talking about the Corruption, Crimson and Hallow, and the Souls of Light and Night, but clearly there's more changes to hard mode than that, not to mention the Corruption, Crimson already exist in a pre-hard mode world, and they're changed by the spirits being released as well. It's clearly some outside force. It all raises the question, what exactly are the Ancient Spirits of Light and Dark? Fallen gods? Why did killing the Wall of Flesh, essentially the distorted form of the guide, release them? Terrarian is a real EO. Terraria collaborated with One Drop EOs and featured some of their EOs in the game. In return, the company produced the Terrarian and Kraken EOs, both originating from Terraria. Angel's statue has 5 different TIDs in the game's code. Removed items were sometimes replaced with Angel statues. This might explain why they have multiple IDs. 180,000 Uzi drop rate to test players. When the Uzi was introduced in 1.2, it had this insanely low drop rate. This was corrected in one of the hot fixes. Beta Queen Bee sprite. The Queen Bee had a beta sprite that much more closely resembled the Hornet enemies. The Solar Cultists. Another type of cultist that may have been planned at one point. A white cultist archer is present in the game, but unspawnable, and the clothier sells solar cultist tropes. Ancient Vision, an easily missable boss minion spawned by the lunar cultist when the phantasm dragon is already present, resembles the head of Moon Lord Cthulhu. Traveling Merchant is a weeaboo, reference to how the traveling merchant sells a lot of items inspired by Asian cultures. Wraiths are dead NPCs. The Terraria trading cards that were obtainable with the collector's edition of Terraria featured a wraith card that said that wraiths are the souls of people that were killed by eaters of souls. Mud ball, unused projectile, resembles the dirt ball. The projectile that is used when moving around dirt with the dirt rod. Maybe the dirt rod was planned to also move mud. Or maybe we were robbed of the magnificent mud rod. Shiny black slab. Removed item exclusive to Android versions of Terraria that summoned a pet android. Ryugaj Nanana no Me Izukin, an anime where one of the characters is seen playing Terraria. Chinese censored bosses. The Chinese mobile version of Terraria was heavily censored. It removed all references to blood or skeletons, not just bosses, and replaced them with unique sprites. Golem forced to stay weak? Probably more of a joke. The Golem is considered to be a very easy boss and Relogic never gave him any substantial buffs, perhaps on purpose. Wyvern segments are reincarnated souls, most likely another joke. The Wyvern drops multiple souls and is made out of multiple segments like all Worm AI enemies. Tim manifests when he is needed. Tim has an increased spawn rate if the player character is wearing a gem robe but doesn't have the wizard hat. Hidden Santa names. Santu is the only NPC without random names. Maybe they were planned at some point. Goblin Tinkerer gives you bad reforges to keep you hooked, a running joke born out of the frustration of players who got bad reforges from the Goblin. Large Bomb, a bug bomb that appeared on the console tutorial map with the large prefix. Terraria 3DS map Fireflower. In the 3DS version, there is an icon of the Fireflower power-up from the 1990 side-scrolling platform game Super Mario World in the bottom right corner of the underworld. Zoologist has committed murder. The zoologist is a werewolf of some kind, and loses control during blood moons. One of her quote is, "This one time, at Critter Camp, I woke up one morning and everything was torn apart. Like, wow, how did I sleep through that?" She also warns the player to stay away while in her werewolf form. This suggests that she's barely able to keep control. It's very a stretch to say that she may have lost control before, and taken someone's life. One of the golfer's quotes is, "Graveyards creep me out. I don't like practicing my swings on top of my family and friends." Since the golfer and the zoologist are siblings, and the golfer mentions family, it's possible zoologist accidentally killed one of her family members on a blood moon. Inferno Potion Illegal Resolution. Inferno Potion Illegal Resolution refers to how when drinking the Inferno Potion, the ring of fire that surrounds the player has an odd level of detail that doesn't quite match anything else in the game. All mushrooms are alive. Reference to the fact that the truffle refers to glowing mushrooms as his children. Poisonous Spore Banner, an enemy in the game's code that only has its respective banner. Be safe, Terraria needs you, a quote from the Dryad. What's interesting about this quote is the fact that it refers to the world as Terraria instead of whatever name you give your world. Perhaps the Dryad is referring to the game as a whole and this is actually a fourth wall break. Idle snowman hidden in the game's files, yet another unused enemy. This time a snowman that was supposed to appear in the Frost Legion that has a stick of dynamite stuck in its head. Boring Bow, an unimplemented weapon, resembling a bow from the Dungeon Defenders franchise. NPC.name.none2. The last unused enemy in this Iceberg. It doesn't even have a proper name and it uses the sprite of the Wandering Eye. Night's Edge merch imperfect manifestation. Terraria released a Night's Edge toy sword that looks slightly different from its in-game counterpart. Why the metal detector works on heart crystals. Think about it, heart crystals are gems, right? There should be no way a metal detector could pick up on them, unless, of course, there's more to heart crystals than meets the eye. The only way to explain it is that there's metal inside. They're not some innocent little ruby formation. It's all a lie. They're real hearts, with blood rich in iron running straight through them. Player, NPC marriage. There are people online who get very attached to fictional characters. Some people even call them their wives, and seriously mean it. With the amount of Terraria players out there, it's not absurd to think that some have probably married an NPC. Also, in the credits, some people have said that the ending scene looks oddly like a marriage between the player and the princess. Demon Eyes line of sight is important. Demon Eyes, being flying eyeballs, can only attack the player if there's a clear path to them. But that's basic game knowledge. They're literal flying eyes. Wouldn't it be likely that they have some greater power of sight? Why exactly do they bounce off of walls and houses, relentlessly pursuing the player even when they take shelter? What if their vision is important in a much more serious way than just how they attack the player, and they can see things no other NPC can? The Ptfa cluster. Ptfa, or Beyond the Forgotten Ages, was a moderately well-known content mod. Eventually, work on the mod stopped. This likely had to do with the modding lead coder curse. But in its height, the mod's fans were very devoted, and some said the mod was better than any other. People in other parts of the modding community began to suspect that Ptfa fans, or the Ptfa cluster as they came to be called, were planning things secretly. Several Ptfa devs went on to work on other mods. But what if they were using their influence to orchestrate something behind the scenes? When bad things happened to other mods, people started to believe it was caused by the Ptfa cluster, but then again, no one really knows for sure. Otherworld was cancelled to keep players' focus on the original. Terraria. Otherworld was a highly anticipated Terraria spin-off that we heard very little about for years, before it was originally cancelled. There are various theories about why it was cancelled, from poorly managed dev teams, to creative issues, to it being a scam to take Relogic's money for a game that no one was actually developing. However, a theory that no one really seems to talk about is, what if they cancelled it because they wanted players to remain attached to the base game? By releasing a second Terraria game, they could be spreading their player base thin. People might even leave the game. So, by focusing on the original game instead, players could remain hooked on the same game they'd been playing for years. Noise.png. Hidden in the game's files is an image of multicolored static, but why? It's possible it was used for testing purposes, or for game filters, but it doesn't seem related to anything in the game. Is it possible there's some secret hidden in the image? In any case, it gives off a chilling vibe. Don't trust the NPCs. As stated earlier, the guide's origins are a secret, but the same can be said for any NPC. Where do they even come from? Are there cities of NPCs? Or, maybe NPCs spawn in much the same way enemies do. An NPC may be no different from a zombie, its body created by the spirit of Terraria itself. If NPCs, while they might seem friendly, rise from the stuff of the earth of Terraria like any other enemy, it doesn't seem like a great idea to trust them. After all, they do play a large part in making the game immersive. Maybe that's what Terraria wants. Impending doom screen shake alters your heart rate. If you've reached Moon Lord, You can probably testify that the pause as impending doom approaches for the first time is one of the most tense moments of the game. Your heart starts beating faster as you prepare yourself for the end of your journey. But what about the dark vignette that shows on screen as the music fades out to be replaced by silence? It pulses and shakes, almost like a heart itself, always at a constant rate. Maybe your pulse is in some way synchronizing with it. Don't know if this is true, but when I look back at it, the first time it did pulse and shake more times than I can remember. Nowadays when I fight the Moon Lord, I'm always wondering why there's barely any shakes. What do you think? Zombie AI is 3,000 lines of code long. AI is one of the most complicated parts of code. However, the AI zombies use, Fighter AI, is relatively simple, and 3,000 lines of code is a lot more than you'd expect. To put this into perspective, on one extreme, people have written tiny games in only 10 lines of code. That's an absurd feat, but it still shows how much 3,000 lines really is. Technically, this code contains edge cases for every NPC with Fighter AI, which partially explains it. But even so, it seems far too much. In the modding community, it's common to refer to sloppily written source code as red code, which is commonly teased as not being terribly efficient. However, what if the AI is that long for a reason? What if it has some ulterior purpose? Just imagine what could be secretly done with code that long. Terraria secret test build was leaked by Starbound Dev. A few years ago, an early test build of Terraria was leaked. Around that time, one of the Terraria devs left the game to work on Starbound. There was a rumor that it had been leaked by the dev who left the game, perhaps as an act of spite. Did they have some grudge against the game? Or did they perhaps know something as a dev that we as players did not? Or, what if there was something in the test build that they thought the public had the right to see for themselves? TerraToilet true purpose. TerraToilet is a joke. At least, that's how it's presented. But the tooltip says, seriously? This is what you used the broken hero sword for? What if we take this tooltip as a hint, instead of a joke? Maybe it takes a broken hero sword to craft for a reason. After all, it does contain the power to forge the Terra Blade. But, if you find that too hard to believe, leave the game if you can, but a part of you will remain. Have you stopped playing Terraria for a few months, and lost interest? But when you come back, you instantly start getting invested again, like you never stopped in the first place. You get a sense of nostalgia for the game, and you might be reminded of a happier time. What if that's not just because you're fond of the game, but because part of you, quite literally, is in the game? And by playing, you're reuniting with that interest of yours. What's part of you? At the very least, it's true in a metaphorical sense. I can believe in this theory because recently I started progressing again on my old world after a few months, and sometimes I feel like if I'm a part of the game rather than just a player. The gameplay seeing right now is that same world I haven't seen in months. Calamity mod owner drunken rants. Fabzil, the owner of the Calamity mod, was known for getting drunk and rambling on the mod's Discord server. His messages ranged from humorous to disturbing, and on one occasion, he even joked he'd stolen the skin of a poor woman's son and worn it as his own. This is very likely related to the modding lead coder curse. This was years ago. However, and these days, after distancing himself from the mod intermittently, and taking a step back, he's doing much better.
bloodmoon_smiley.png. When creating a world with the Journey's End release date seed, aka Drunk World, the moon will be replaced with the smiley pictured on the iceberg. It's based on an astronomy hoax that was supposed to occur on the same day Journey's End released. Every seed in Terraria is chosen based on the individual. When you spend enough time on a world, it begins to feel like home. Every little part of the surface is familiar to you after having been passed by so many times, and you grow attached to the landscape. Could it be that's not just the result of familiarity, but that when you pick a random seed, it's generated specifically to have characteristics that appeal to the individual and their playstyle? A Terraria world, in a very real way, is the extension of the player, maybe even down to the seed. Alpha Kip Codex. Alpha Kip, the lead coder for Ancients Awakened, ran several puppet Discord accounts, pretending to be many of the other devs for the mod. This went on for a while, nobody knowing that the other devs were really Alpha Kip's alts. Eventually, one of the alts posted a message, claiming Alpha Kip had dissociative identity disorder and that she was one of his identities. This was followed by many arguments between Alpha Kip and his alts, causing the actual other devs to be very concerned, and spurring many to leave. Alpha Kip had also threatened some of them to stay. What's interesting is that actual people did claim his story seems very likely fabricated, meaning he didn't even have did. A document came out called the Alpha Kip Codex, chronicling the whole situation in length. It's a huge rabbit hole, so I recommend you check it out for yourself. He was likely heavily affected by the Terraria mod lead coder curse. All painting come together to form an image. While there has no been discovery of the completed image so far, it might just be that nobody's managed to combine them in the right pattern yet. There are so many paintings, and so many ways they could be arranged. True boss progression. It's common knowledge that Duke Fishron can be summoned as soon as hard mode begins. However, due to his immense difficulty, he's often only fought post-Planter if not after Golem. This most likely isn't what the entry is referring to. But it makes you think, what if there are other intended skips, or maybe even reversals in order, that can only be discovered by truly dedicated players? It might even involve removed or hidden bosses. It could be anything. Given this entry is at the bottom layer, it seems to imply that there's more to it. Since there's no information out there, the true boss progression, whatever it is currently unknown. Raw_2.xnb. Raw_2.xnb is a hidden audio file in the game's code that has gone completely unused. It can only be found by digging through the game's source files. It's a high-pitched screaming sound that's honestly just extremely unsettling, which might have something to do with why it was never used. Or, there could be an even worse reason it wasn't used, without confirmation from the devs, which we'll likely never receive. We can't know. Here, take a listen. The modding lead coder curse. Every time a mod gets popular, something strange happens to the lead coder. Haven't you noticed? Not a single coder makes a big mod without it taking a toll on them in some way. Sometimes things get so bad that the coder quits. They're the smart ones. After all, you can only become so invested in a game before you lose part of yourself in it. You feel an evil presence watching you. This is a chat message that appears shortly before Eye of Cthulhu spawns naturally for the first time. As stated before, the iceberg seems to imply demon eyes of some power of sight that surpasses all other NPCs, which raises the question, what about the Eye of Cthulhu? The question is, how can the Eye of Cthulhu be watching you, even if it isn't spawned in? Maybe the evil presence isn't even Cthulhu at all. The other original dev went missing. Blue was the other original dev of Terraria, Red's partner. But a few months after the game's release, he quietly left the game's production. Blue had worked with Red for years on projects like SMBX. It's not hard to see they were pretty close. They even showed off the game by posting a Terraria Let's Play together. Blue probably knew more about Terraria than anyone except Red, so why did he leave Terraria, especially when it was doing so well? Did he know something? A post by someone claiming to be Blue appeared afterwards, implying he was fired. But no reasons were given, and the implication that he was fired only raises more questions. A friend from beyond. This is the tooltip for the Moonling pet, summoned by the piece of moon squid dropped by Moonlord in Master Mode. But is this mini Moonlord really your friend? The Iceberg has already made it clear that you shouldn't trust NPCs and the companion cube. It's safe to say that you probably shouldn't trust this pet either, despite its innocent appearance. It also seems to reference H.P. Lovecraft's short story From Beyond, about a man who observes entities from alternate realities. The game wants you to trust the Moonling, calling it a reward. Don't. 4chan player obsessed with game created over 5,000 characters. This player was so enthralled in the game that they made a massive world, populated it with literal thousands of Terraria characters, each with their own hopes, dreams, and backstories, then bought a $2,000 PC so they could have 30 tabs of Terraria open at once to role-play between. It showcases the absolute extreme of player addiction, and serves as a warning to those who don't understand just how dangerous the game can be if you give in to its allure. Here's a link to the whole thing in the description, and be warned, it is 4chan, after all. You will continue to play Terraria. Do you really think you'll ever stop playing for good? You might take a break for a few months, or years if you're lucky. But you'll come back. You'll get invested in it all over again. The process of making tiny worlds and mastering control of their resources. The only players who really leave for good are those who didn't play long enough to get hooked. Of course, no matter how dedicated a fan you are, eventually there will be a moment for everyone that you play the game for the last time. But that's only because death comes before you can play again.